as prescribed by the City Council. This meeting is being held in person with limited attendance as recommended by the Centers for Disease Control and by CMT virtual attendance. Notice that this meeting was going to be held by Communication Media Technology, along with a physical location, was posted on the city's website. The notice provided that those members of the public needing reasonable accommodation to participate in the meeting should contact the city clerk for assistance by noon on Monday, November 16, 2020. Access to this meeting is being provided via live stream on the city's website at www.palmcoastgov.com and 386-223-1690. Should technological difficulties arise, the chair may recess or adjourn the meeting and advise of a time to reconvene or reschedule the meeting. If you're having problems connecting or need technical assistance, please call 386-986-2391. Public participation will work as follows. The chair will call for public participation. Those in physical attendance will be given the opportunity to address the PLDRB members by approaching the podium. When no further in-person attendees approach the podium, the chair will then call for public participation from callers that are on the line to address the board. For all callers, prior to calling in with your comments, if you are watching the meeting from our website, please mute your computer so when you call in with your comments, there is no interference. To participate via phone, please call 386-223-1690. You will need to hit *9 to raise your hand to provide your comments when you would like to speak during public participation. You will be acknowledged by being unmuted, and you will hear a message that you have been unmuted. Please begin by stating your name clearly and slowly for the record. You will have 3 minutes to speak. When there's 15 seconds left to your 3 minutes, you will hear a beep, and then at the end of your 3 minutes, you will hear another beep, and you will be muted at that time. You will not be disconnected from the meeting. All callers will have the opportunity to speak. Please be aware there may be a short pause as we switch to the new caller. Today is November the 18th, 2020. It's approximately 5:30 p.m. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, the first item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from the November 4th, 2020 meeting. Are there any corrections or additions from the board?
We need to do roll call.
Need to find out if we have a quorum, don't we?
Yes, we do.
All right, sorry, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Mrs. Lucas.
Here.
Mr. Albano.
Here.
Mr. Di Maria is excused. Mr. Scully.
Here.
Ms. Shank.
Here.
Mr. Lemon.
Here.
Ms. Bott. Ms. Nicholson.
Here.
Mr. Hilton is excused. Chairman, we do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we will address the minutes from the November 4th meeting. Are there any corrections or additions or any comments from the board? If not, is there a motion to approve?
Make a motion that the minutes of the November 4th meeting be approved.
Is there a second?
A second.
Yeah, there's a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Irene, would you call the roll?
Mr. Albano.
Yes.
Mrs. Lucas.
Yes.
Ms. Nicholson.
Yes.
Mr. Scully.
Yes.
Mr. Lemon.
Yes.
Ms. Shank.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
The motion carries 7-0.
All right, thank you. Item 2 is the Lakeview Estates Master Plan Development, application number 4150. Before we begin, I think the board attorney has some comments for us.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, Board. First order of business is, as you know, we ask for ex parte communications before quasi-judicial proceedings. As you know, this is a quasi-judicial proceeding. It was last heard at the September 30th hearing. So if you've had any ex parte communications about this matter between September 30th and tonight, please disclose them for the record now.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I received a call from the attorney for the applicant, but I feel that I can make the decision based on the facts presented here.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. With that being said, just to recap, as you remember, this item was heard on September 30th, and at the conclusion of that meeting, the board voted to table the matter to a later date. We didn't have a date certain at the time. So that means that everything that occurred at the September 30th meeting is still on the record. All the objections that were heard are still on the record. Everyone, the applicant's presentation that they did, staff, everything's still on the record. So that's all still up for your consideration. As far as it being tabled, before we can start, we need a motion to remove this matter off the table so that you can consider it. So if someone could make that motion now, we can move forward.
I'll make a motion to remove it off the table.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to remove it off the table. Irene, would you call the roll?
Mr. Albano,
Yes.
Mrs. Lucas,
Yes.
Ms. Nicholson,
Yes.
Mr. Scully,
Yes.
Mr. Lemon,
Yes.
Ms. Shank,
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
The motion carries 7-0.
All right, thank you. We'll start back then with this item. Mr. Tyner, who would make the presentation for the city?
Well, as our city attorney said, we have the old presentation that was previously provided. We're ready to go if you want us to go through the same presentation again. The only things that were added that we forwarded to the planning board that was mentioned at the last meeting by the applicant and their transportation engineer or planner who testified at the last meeting, we did receive the traffic report, and we also received the environmental study that they mentioned at the last meeting. I guess I would suggest where we left off was maybe, well, I will say that, as you know, in the staff report, that the city staff recommendation remains the same as it was. It was our professional opinion when we did the analysis from the first submittal that our same opinion applies today. So our recommendation remains the same. And the applicant has not provided any changes to their application. So I think to make things, it's a little bit different, but I think we are prepared maybe to go slide by slide on the different tracks where we have the differences of opinion with the applicant and staff. And we can do that maybe jointly where, city staff can give our position. This is kind of the staff position, followed by the applicant and what their proposal is. I think it'd be a lot easier to do that track by track, and we'll take some good notes on potentially maybe making a recommendation for each of the tracks so we can move it forward. I will say that, the applicant, I know it was tabled last time, but they are looking for a recommendation for this public hearing to move the process forward. And that's just a suggestion, Mr. Chairman. So.
Okay, I think that would be helpful for me to see track by track the differences between the two. Is that okay with the board? Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
And Mr. Hoover, I think we'll do it jointly. So, Bill, if you can maybe come up and we'll give you can sit at the table and Mr. Schmento, maybe,
Sure. Good evening, board. While he's bringing that up, we've kind of worked jointly in putting our proposal and the staff's proposal. But in fairness to my applicant, I just want to make sure that you all understand. When we left here, you all asked that we go back to the drawing table with the city and see if we couldn't get closer on a couple of things. And without pointing fingers at anybody, it's just the way sometimes these things happen. We were unable to make any suggestions to the city position. We were willing to talk to you all tonight about changes or modifications or proposals that the board may have as recommendations, but up until this point, the city was not able to, I guess, come off of their proposal that they presented to you the first time. So I just want to make sure that you understand that my client is willing to continue to work with the city on creating a project that is in the best interest of not only the city, but the residents up there. And there are some things that we can do, and we're open to suggestions. So with that, Bill, are you putting up the side-by-sides?
Was up there.
Yeah, the
Yes.
comparison one that we sent. I have a thumb drive if you want it.
No, it was up there.
Was it? Okay.
Need to put it back up. There we go.
So,
So I think you're starting with the Bill Hoover, senior planner with the city, Michael Schimento representing the applicant. So I think the intent was to start with the ones where we're closer and then end with the ones like tracks 1 and 3 where most of the issues were.
I think that's right. Bill, I guess I made this, trying to help the parties kind of and help you all. But could you go to the last slide and just show the project again, not only for the public, but for the board, and then we'll start back up at the beginning. I should have put that slide up first. It's the, sure, it's just a little low, I'm sorry. Can you go to the very last slide that shows the entire project, I guess? Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
So this is just as a reminder for you all, if you have it in your package, but I'm not sure the public has it though. So that's the project that was presented by the applicant, and it is, for purposes of tonight, it's been divided up into 10 different, what we'll call tracts, parcels, and each one of them has, in the PUD, their own design requirements and standards. And so this is kind of an overall map of where those tracks are located on the golf course. And we can go back to the beginning and start off, as Bill suggested, to show you the ones that we're pretty close on. And we were a month ago. So if we want to go back to track 2, so Bill, you can go first if you'd like.
Okay, on track 2, I think the main difference was that, let's see, the applicant's is on the left and staff's is on the right. If you go along Lake Success Drive there, the applicant is showing a area B, which would be at the southwest part of the green area. And they're showing to develop the whole area. Staff's concern was it doesn't meet the one section in the land development code. So one of the key things that was a stumbling block for everyone last time was it requires a view protection zone behind each house. And it's a little hard to see here, but there are some houses to the north of that and to the south of that. So there has to be a view protection zone on it's like a light tan area B shown on the applicants. So the determination there is how wide does that view protection zone need to be? So staff being conservative, we just showed the whole area as view protection zone, which would probably be an area, that whole area, the width there is probably 300, 350 feet, possibly 400 feet in width. So let's say the planning board decided that 100 foot, just pulling that number out of the air, so if it was 100 feet view protection zone on the north and south, then the rest of that area could be developed. So that the width of a view protection zone is not defined in the land development code, and it's probably an item that we need to discuss on some of these other tracks. So that's, you're going to see that same issue on probably half of these tracks.
So planning board, if I can just summarize too on this one, just to, it's been a month, but the green area, as you could see there, is your open space with no development. The blue area being the lake. the H being, wetlands that are be preserved. So for this specific figure, the difference is on the left-hand side, if you look at the Bs, those are developable areas. So the city staff and the applicant are pretty 99% together on this one. The only difference is if you can compare, the applicant has to be up into the north east corner, so does city staff. We were okay to develop that as FR2, single-family lots. They may be able to get a couple in there. And the only difference is that staff on the right-hand side is not showing that B area for a couple area lots. So that is the difference with this figure, in this tract.
Let me ask a quick question of the board. Would you rather ask questions as we go through each tract? Okay, me too. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right. So is that it for tract 2?
So that's track 2, right? And I think, as Ray said, in the bottom left-hand corner, we have an area of about 400 feet that we had proposed lots. They don't. We'd like to put lots there, and we'd like to provide a view shed protection, which is the issue that we're faced with here, and that the city council will have to deal with also. So that's really the only difference as it relates to track 2.
Are there any questions from the board on tract 2?
I'd like to know, on the section that's marked B, on the east, not the southwest, but B, on the east side,
Yes, sir.
they're abutting existing lots, it appears. So what is the size of the lots that you were proposing in that area?
They're the same size as those that are adjacent. They're
Okay.
8,000 or 10,000 square foot lots.
They're SFR2, so I believe that's 60 foot wide and
It's the same as the
7,500
existing.
square
All the
feet.
zoning is the same. Yeah, 10,000.
10,000,
So they
okay,
are consistent with the adjacent lots.
thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. Next tract.
Did you have a question, Shay?
Yes, I was just going to ask a question. Staff's recommendation is that you be limited to the number of lots you could develop on B, not the entire shaded area, correct? Because what you're asking for is to develop the entire shaded area, and then staff's recommendation reduces for the view protection zone, correct? So you would not get as many lots, is what you're asking. You're asking for more lots, and staff's recommendation is to reduce the number of lots for the view protection zone.
Really, I think the only difference on track 2 as it relates is that we would like to put lots on the southwest corner B,
Right.
and we are willing to put a view shed protection there, and staff adjacent to those lots so that there's a buffer between the existing residents and the future single-family lots. And staff has just said no lots.
Okay.
Okay. Please.
Just to be more specific,
Just please, can you please state your name for the record?
Alexander Yusilovsky,
Thank you.
manager for I'm an applicant. We agree on the total number of units which are allowed on all this property. We are agree. Question is how to allocate them. In track 2, it's a perfect example where we would like to have larger lots which are exactly the same like a character of the neighborhood. And if we have a larger lots or split them better through the tracks, we can accommodate larger lots, which was very big concern for the neighbors. If we, in this case, for example, not allowed to put, let's say, 3 or 4 lots or 2 lots, whatever it is, we will have to increase density on other lots, which will decrease, obviously, the size of them. And difference, if you're looking at the track 2, you have B on the left side, on the west side, and the east side, B, which we agree with the city staff. And the difference is why city agree on one side and not another, because neighbors have either backyard or side view to the proposed new lots. And city has absolutely no problem if it's side by side. But if it's a backyard, here we're talking about view protection zone and the difference and the buffer. Realistically, we need any number, and if it's, let's say, 400 feet, if we have 50 or 70 or 100 or whatever number it is from each side, the balance could be split for the SFR2 units, which are absolutely the same like everything in the area. Just to make it clear
That's
to
what I was,
to the board.
thank you, that's what I was asking. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes?
I'll just make a suggestion. I mean, it's up to the board, but, you know, we're going to have a lot of tracks to go through, and it's just a suggestion, and maybe we take each track and maybe build a consensus before we move forward to the next track, because I'm afraid if we go, you know, 10, 15 tracks, then we're coming back again, I don't know if it would be more efficient to get a consensus. Staff is prepared to write down notes, and then we can summarize that at the end. Just a suggestion.
I'm not sure what the board wants to do. I mean, we may be flipping back and forth between, like in the staff proposal or the applicants from track to track, so I don't know how we keep track of that.
Like, for example, this one, it's either, you know, in favor of the applicant's proposal or city staff for track 2.
You're just looking for a consensus from the board on which one they favor?
Yes, I mean, it would just be a consensus, because obviously you'd still have public comment that you'd want to take into consideration for each track. So, you know, it wouldn't be a vote as to that track, but you could get a feel for the way the board was going and make notations, and then if you heard something from the public that changed your mind on it, you know, you would always go back and tailor the final motion.
Right, is that
Mr.
acceptable to
Schmidt.
the board?
And is it, I mean, is it
Okay.
also an option that they could say something else other than our proposal or your proposal?
Exactly,
Okay, all right.
exactly.
All right, on track 2, how does the board feel? Want to just go from one end to the other and see which one you favor? All right, Mr. Albano, you're up.
I side with the staff on track 2.
Okay,
Side with the staff on track 2.
okay,
I do as well.
I do as well.
I have one question on track 2, where the staff has that rectangle box. Is that an indication of the possible development for SFR2 with the view protection zones? I just want clarity on that. Because you have a rectangular box and you're indicating that you're sectioning something out. So I just want clarity. Is that an indication that SFR2 could be approved there?
For the proposal right now, on the northeast side, yes. We could
Okay.
probably do a couple houses that are adjacent to
Right.
existing houses.
Okay.
But
So
on the
then,
s-
yes, I support staff's recommendation.
South is no.
All right,
I support staff
Keep going.
recommendation.
And my question for clarification is on the lower portion of the plot where it was yellow or beige on the applicants and it's now completely green. Are we suggesting, staff suggesting that there's no homes there?
That's correct. That is staff's proposal.
I support staff's proposal.
okay, I think it's pretty clear. On track 2?
Track 5, I think, is quite easy. That'll just
That's
say, and go back to woods and forest.
The track 5 is all view protection zone
That is correct. It'll be,
on both sides.
right, there'll be no maintenance, no mowing, it'll just go back to forest.
Okay. So we can move on then.
Yeah, I think we can move on with this one.
Okay,
All right, this is track 4. I hate to make it more complex, but depending upon what you all decide on track 3, we would like to, in order to accommodate the community's needs for larger lots, what we wanted to do is be able to put a stormwater pond where it is generally depicted on the left one. We have worked with staff, and I think we told you last time that we have in the PUD that in the event we can use a portion of tract 4 for stormwater retention, which is basically a lake, we would limit it to the existing areas with no trees. So there would be little to no tree removal on track 4, and what we would call the old fairway, which is now grown up. That's where the stormwater ponds to be used for track 3 would be. I think staff's proposal is they've proposed nothing on track 3, and therefore there's no need for a pond on track 4, if that makes sense. Apologize.
And the view protection zone that's along the back of those lots, are there trees there, or is it open?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There's if you can imagine what the golf course looked like, there were trees on both sides of the fairway. Some of it's grown in, and again, we wouldn't disturb any of the existing trees. If there's a tree in the middle of the fairway, we would need to, but any impact to trees would be minimized, and stormwater pond would be left to the open areas on that parcel. So I guess technically it's kind of hard to decide what you want to do there to get to track 3. I apologize. So maybe we just come back to this.
Let's go to track 3 then.
All right, next one. So that's an example for the community to show what it would look like from an aerial view. You can see where the existing open space is. You can see where the existing trees are. None of that would be disturbed, and any stormwater would be in that open area.
Well, I have one question. The retention pond, because it looks like from the one row of lots you are going to see that. That's going to be maintained
HOA.
constantly?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
HOA.
And the HOA being for your development, not anyone outside of that?
Yes, sir. It'll all be
Okay.
privately maintained.
Okay, thank
I
you.
have a question. This retention pond, is it gonna always have water in it, or is it stormwater only?
It would be wet retention the entire time.
Okay.
Okay. Bill, you want to go on? So here we are again, 6 and 7. 6 would be the same as 4. If you permitted development in 3, 6 would need to be a retention pond also in the same manner that 4 would be, where we would do a stormwater pond only in those open areas. But track 7, there is a large, 400, 500, 600 feet of open space at the end of track 7. We've proposed lots there and are willing to obviously put viewshed protection zones on the sides so as to minimize any impact to the existing residents. And you can see what staff put forth on the right. So if you want to just go to track 7, yes, sir.
Well, let me ask a question about that. The staff proposal has a smaller area in B.
Yes, sir.
Because it backs up to those other lots. Can't read the name of the street. But because that's the view protection zone, and they're thinking, and did you just say that you would leave a view protection zone there, or you would develop right up to the back of those lots?
No, we put a viewshed protection zone, and I guess up to the city council and yourselves is, what is a reasonable width of a viewshed protection zone is really what we're talking about. As it relates.
What's the staff width there on 7 between G and B?
It looks like it's about 100 feet at a minimum.
100 feet? Okay.
Had you attempted to negotiate that with the developer, the 100 feet minimum, so that you could come to agreement?
Well, as I said before, the city was not willing to move off of their original proposal. So we're willing to work. It's just that city was not willing to move from the
What did you propose?
Well, as in other areas, we had proposed a 50-foot viewshed protection zone elsewhere in the development, except for track 3, when we had the flyover last time, where we were 100 feet and not touching any of those trees. So we were at 50 feet.
Thank you.
So the net loss for you, if for track 7, would be just basically one residential lot?
One or two. Mm-hmm.
One or two.
So if I may just explain, I think it was to your comment before, the entire project is entitled for about 277 or 78, depending upon the survey works out, units. And as we take away these lots, putting them on track 1 or 3, then begins to affect theoretically the size of those lots. And, you know, we heard the community, we came in originally at 50-foot lots, and we're now at over 12,000-foot lots on track 3. So just food for thought, Mr. Amano.
So to clarify though, theoretically, had you had this negotiation, which by the way was the content of the call, that there was no, you know, there's no movement there, by the way, for the record. But you were willing to say in this B here, we would put a 50-foot instead of the 100-foot that the
Yes, sir.
plan, in that particular case.
Yes, sir.
And also on the entitlements, that's a maximum number per acre.
Correct. No, for the entire,
Yeah, no, I understand, but
Project.
it's the entire MPD is a maximum of 1 per acre, right?
yes, sir.
The view protection on your plan between the lots and the pond, is that also 50 feet?
Between the lots and the.
Yeah, on track 6, you got a proposed pond and you have view protection along the outsides of that. Is that, it looks
No.
like it's about 50.
It meanders, Chair. It is basically, in the PD, it says we will not touch any of the existing trees along that old fairway, and that the pond would only be in the open space. So in some areas, it could be 150 feet. In some areas, it may be 50 feet. It's just whatever the existing trees are in the back of those homes. So if we had ours choice, the residents would have their existing tree lines, no trees removed, and then in their open space, which will go back to forest, would actually be a lake, is what we would propose.
So both of those tracks, that pond is serving track 3?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, and either Mr. Tyner or Mr. Hoover, the city's objection to a pond is what? As part of the view protection zone?
Yeah, our position was to keep it natural,
But natural is an old fairway, so,
right?
okay.
To have it go natural. And then on track 7, I mean, that is, you know, I think we were about, 100 feet, Mr. Hoover?
I'd
on
say
the-
it looks like about 100 feet.
Yeah, and that's just, if you look at the house to the south, we relied upon, you know, that open space, so we were wanting to
Right.
protect.
You're just
that
protecting the
resident.
view of those last couple of lots
Yes.
there. Okay, I get it.
Yes, sir.
If I could just make a point of clarification,
Okay.
Mr. Chair. The proposed language by the applicant on track 6, as it pertains to the area behind the homes, states, "A stormwater pond can be created in the middle of track 6 as long as existing vegetation is maintained for the first 60 feet behind each lot."
Okay.
So
60 feet.
it's not meandering unless the 60 feet encompasses the entirety of the vegetation. If that would be your intent, then we would need to modify this language a little bit further, just.
Mr. Chimeno, this proposed pond for 6, is this to mitigate stormwater for track 3, or are you looking to move water from track 3 onto this pond?
No, that would be on track 6 and 4, the prior one. Those would be the stormwater ponds for the track 3 development. They would be maintained by the HOA, and one of the reasons we propose to put them there is because if we put them on track 3, it takes away land, developable land, which then has an adverse impact on being able to expand the size of the lots which the residents created. So we moved stormwater off so that we could increase the size of the lots on track 3.
Thank you.
That's the theory.
Is it possible to see track 3 before you make a decision?
Certainly. We can go to track 3 if you'd like. So track 3, if you recall, that was the one where we did the flyover on the drone and showed what 100 feet actually is and how big it is and how very few of the existing trees would be touched, and that the residents' existing views would not be impacted at all, other than 3 lots where they had cleared out the trees and put pipes in. So we'd like to put residential uses on track 3. The lots proposal that we showed you showed lots that were 60 feet wide by 120 to 150 feet deep, or 200 feet deep. So they were extremely large, what we would call, estate lots under your code. And then at the southwest or the southern corner, there was a small cul-de-sac where there were also lots designed as the same size of the surrounding neighborhood. And there was no stormwater on those because we were moving stormwater off to 4 and 6. And so, again, to enable us to put density there, units there, and go back and expand the size of the lots, which was clearly a request of the community. Yes, sir.
How many lots are proposed on track 3?
Let me ask our planner, Bob Dickinson. Mr. Dickinson, approximately how many lots would be on track 3? 53 lots.
I know we talked about driveways at the previous meeting, but as I remember, were you doing a driveway for every 2? Or
Yes, it was a shared driveway.
Have you looked at, that's still a lot of driveways on a road that doesn't have any driveways, so have you looked at trying to do maybe 2 or 3 driveways for all of track 3 instead of 26 or whatever it would be?
We are able to work with you to design something that's reasonable. There's concepts of putting less driveways, so a driveway that would service 4 lots. There was also the concept of maybe just doing if some of you know Clubhouse Drive, as you're coming towards there's those older, I guess they're duplexes from the 70s or 80s, and they have a one-way road, and they all share it.
Road. Mm-hmm.
So that's an opportunity for us to look at and do. So there would only be really 2, maybe 3, 4 access points onto Lakeview, and all the residents would share that and go one way. But that's an option that we are willing to discuss also, sir.
But the lots would be reduced in size if you did a concept like that, correct?
Not necessarily, because we could put the loop road, because it would only be one way. It would be roughly 12, 14 feet wide. And it would be an easement over all their lots. So their lots would then go all the way out towards the road, but we would share a shared access road or driveway through those. So, and that would all be maintained by the HOA and the homeowners.
And your drawing here has a 100-foot view protection zone between track 3 and the existing lots. That's what it looks like here.
Correct. And you may have recalled also we had a schematic of it. And we have also about a 35-foot building setback beyond the 100-foot view shed protection. So from the rear of the lot of the existing homeowners to the next structure would be at least 135 feet.
I think I saw that.
Roughly how long?
Yeah, I think the slide for your original concept is, thought I saw it in here. Could you put that up there, please?
Yeah. Give the next. Which one was that? They want the concept for 3. Yes. Thank you. Kind of hard to see it.
Yeah, it is. So, yeah, given our experience with the, or the recent, was it the last meeting or the one before it? The shared by 2 owners concept is in terms of the driveways is kind of, I think that is possibly trouble down the road. I do like the idea of the loop drive. So it's just a couple access, really an access and an egress, serving those, so you don't have a bunch of traffic going out onto that road from the residents. So.
Yeah, that's an option too. Whether they do it there, you can see it down in LPGA, their community when you go in. They have little clusters like this that use the same option.
I'd just like to make a comment. So, we tabled this back at the last meeting for you guys to go back, but I'm a little surprised that nothing has changed in track 3. It just seems like people have just drawn a line in the sand, and this is what you're presenting. So,
I will politely object to that, Mr. Urbano. As I said earlier, we're able to work with you all It was just that the city had taken a position that they were not interested in discussing it.
I understand that, but couldn't you, as an applicant, just present the new Track 3 plan without going and meeting with Mr. Tyner and his staff?
Well, not to sound silly, but that would be like negotiating with my 16-year-old. I have no idea what he wants. So I could put forth 7 or 8 different schematics, and if the answer was no from the beginning, that's what you all are here, and we're willing to talk with the city council. So with all due respect, I don't know how to talk to or negotiate or brainstorm with someone who's not interested in talking, to be very clear.
Thank you.
Well,
So, I would just like to ask staff, has there been anything, an alternative design proposed to you? A written alternative design versus the one that they provided the last time? Have they suggested anything else to you in writing?
No, ma'am, there's nothing
Okay,
submitted
thank
to us. And again, it's our position, our professional opinion, when we've been working on this for years, and going with the applicant and discussing with them and working with them, and this was our position.
Thank you.
I think this is kind of one of the crucial ones because this decision affects 3 other tracks, so the real question is, does the board favor any residential on this tract or the staff position of none? As I see it, unless somebody sees it differently.
And, well, I just want to add to that, if these tracks are not developed here, then the applicant is going to try and situate whatever, I think I'm up to 57 tracks that have been not approved by city somewhere else on this land. Is that what the idea is?
That is the juggling game that we're trying to deal with here. Yes, is that they would then go theoretically over to track 1, and then that would force those lots to become smaller, or maybe a multifamily project, which we're not really interested in. Again, when we talked in December with the community and watched what they had said, they really wanted lot sizes that were compatible with the adjacent neighborhoods. And so the more land that can't be developed, it causes us to force smaller lots, which was not the desire of the community.
I'd like to make a point that this all comes back to the staff having to interpret a rather vague section in the code about view protection zones, and I
Thank you, that's
understand.
true.
And that, I think, as I said in the last time we talked about this.
I would agree with you. I mean, if the code said 50 feet, or 25 feet, or 100 feet as a view shed protection zone, I'd defer to Mr. Tyner that he might have a different direction, and maybe development would be allowed.
My point was that the vagueness of that puts the parties and the public in a bad position because they really don't know the rules. So I think with the staff is, I think, a bit conservative on this particular tract. If not building on it is if the staff was intending for their recommendation to be protecting, the VPZs by not building on that entire tract. If there's other reasons not to build on that entire tract, I'd like to hear them.
Yeah,
It was,
I mean, go ahead, Bill.
The one thing, and I think the chairman did mention this, initially, I think the first time we saw any details, it was like a driveway or a shared driveway between each house there. And at one time, when we were just talking verbally, we did talk about having a one-way loop road there. And as staff looked further into the project, staff felt that it would be best in this area here to have that whole fairway as view protection zone. Am I correct, Mr. Tyner?
Yes.
So back to my question, is the staff then okay with taking these 57 lots and redesigning the other portion, track 1 or whatever, to accommodate what is allowed by our code for the number of,
I mean, what we're reviewing right now is a master plan development agreement, because it is zone master plan development. So, you know, the code, you know, we are interpreting the intent of the golf course community protection zones and incorporating that language into this development agreement. So, you know, our intent is, you know, if you're on an old fairway and folks can see it, you know, or it's in back of folks' houses, we want to protect the existing community with the open space that they relied upon.
But it's hard, I recognize it, so, but we have to start with reality here. You know, the reality is, as Mr. Nett said, this isn't a golf course, it never will be a golf course. The city sent out letters to the community that said, there is no obligation to mow this, there is no obligation to maintain. This is all going back to forest. So this concept and notion that a view of a fairway should be preserved as the code was written back in 2006 is a notion that doesn't exist and won't exist. So, you know, we talk about what is the view shed that they have, that these residents have. The view shed, the view that they have, particularly on this hole right now, is 100 feet of forest. They don't have views of a manicured fairway of a golf course. And in fact, if you go out there right now, it's already at 6, 7, 8 feet and will continue to grow into a forest. And so theoretically, if this were to sit for 4 more years, it will be a forest. So what is the view at that time of development? It's a forest. So this is the conundrum with the code that you're facing that we're having trouble with too, because we don't know how to design around something that was anticipated in 2005 that doesn't exist today. I mean, they don't have a view of a fairway and sand traps and tee boxes. So what do we really want? We have to do something that's best for the community to preserve their views so that we do comply with the concept of the code. Thank you.
So, I mean, for the board, basically, either there's some development, maybe with restrictions, but there's some development on track 3, or there's none. That's really the question. So, let's see how everybody feels.
We doing consensus here?
Kind of.
Okay. My choice is to side with staff on track 3.
The staff, okay.
Yeah.
Staff?
I respectfully disagree. I think on track 3, I think it's an overly conservative interpretation of that, although I don't agree with Mr. Schimento. It does say future development, and that's what this is. But my personal recommendation is you have the loop road and you keep the lots large, and have the view protect the 100-foot plus the setback proposed, which would make a total of 135 foot. Mm-hmm. The staff has recommended recommended a 50-foot view protection zone in section 1. So I just don't think it's reasonable to say no to 100 plus a 35-foot setback in track number 3.
To be short, I feel the same as Mr. Scully.
My concern is the staff has been working with you guys for quite some time on the project, and when asked for an alternative design, there hasn't been anything provided. It has been stated verbally, however, nothing concrete has been provided. So, and knowing that we tabled it in September, and we asked for you guys to work this out and come back, and still to come back with the same design speaks volumes. To verbally state that you're willing to put in a loop road when it was just stated that you guys discussed that previously, and then not to come back with a design that actually shows that is concerning. So with that being said, I support staff's recommendation.
Okay?
Oh, boy, I'm in the middle. I completely believe that staff has worked really hard with the applicant to come up with something that they believe and strongly recommend. I also agree with my partner here on the board who believes that we gave you the opportunity to present something else that would be a compromise that we felt would allow for some development there on track 3. And I agree that I think that we gave you adequate time to do that. So because I don't have anything to see that I can actually say makes sense, I'm going to side with staff.
Okay.
May I just interject? I mean, really, I got to keep my calm here. I'm not sure everybody understands what has happened since the last meeting.
Well, before you do that, let me ask Mrs. Lucas where she stands first, and then we can talk.
I'm not prepared to vote on either way.
Okay?
At this point, my understanding is that you're looking for a consensus at this juncture, not for a firm commitment. So I'd like
Correct.
to hear a little bit more, and I'm just going to abstain for the moment.
All right, so for now, it's 4 staff, 2 other, and 1 in between. So I think that's fairly clear that the board as a whole is leaning towards the staff. And if that's the case, then tracks 4, 6, and 7 pretty much would be along the staff proposal as well. Is that how everybody feels?
No change.
Okay. I'm sure we line up the same way that one just was. So, all right, back to you, Mr. Schimento.
After the meeting, we requested meetings with staff to discuss your direction. 3 weeks later, we were given an opportunity to meet with staff to say, what can we do? And at that time, staff said, we're not doing anything. That is very different than what your perception was, is that we didn't come back with any alternatives. Staff's direction to us is there is no alternative. Is no alternative. If you look at the record, there were multiple requests to say, is there any alternative? Is there any opportunity to sit down and discuss it? And staff's direction was no. So that's fine. That's their determination. That's not against Ray personally. When we work with these gentlemen day in and day out, year over year, they're excellent. But it's very important for me and my client for you to understand that how you described it was not accurate. And so I really do want you to understand that it's very difficult to send out engineers and planners to come back to somebody and they said, you don't need to do anything because we're not changing our opinion. So when we say that we're not participating or that we didn't offer anything is not quite a fair assessment of how this has happened over the last 6 weeks.
However, Mr. Chimento, you're presenting to the board. So you had the opportunity to present us a different design concept, even if you weren't able to come to agreement with staff. Then that would have proven to us that you are attempting to work and mitigate the issues that the community has regarding this design.
Correct.
But you chose to bring us back the exact same concept. So that's concerning.
And that's why
If I may, can we please okay, so I'll go over the rules of decorum again for those of you that weren't at the previous meeting. We are taping this, it's for the record. It's even further exacerbated by the fact that part of this proceeding is by Zoom, so there's people on the line and watching it remotely. It makes it very difficult for them to hear the statements of the board, the statements of the applicant, and subsequently your statements, should you choose to speak. So I would ask again, please refrain from any clapping or yelling anything out when it's not your turn to speak. Everyone will get a turn, and believe me, I will make sure everything is quiet when it's your turn to speak. Thank you.
That's right. And I understand your point. I mean, I get it. And this is what we came to talk to you about, since you're the decision maker. I mean, we could hear your comments and say you were interested in A, B, C, or D alternatives, or yes, we're interested, but you got to come back. And we can do that. But when we're trying to, when you gave direction to us and you said, go find something in between with staff, and we can't, maybe I didn't think through it, or we didn't think through it to come back with new proposals to you. But as we said all along, when we started this whole thing out, we're open. We're willing to continue to design and modify if given an opportunity. Alex would like to say one thing.
Alex Ustilovsky. The reason why we didn't change and didn't bring all options which we had on the table and which we discussed this stuff many, many times was only to have that show that area as SFR2. And that SFR2 allows later to make design which will be suitable to the standards. Alternative that city says, just gonna leave this 2,500 linear feet of Lakeview Boulevard as a forest, not a park, not a nice pretty area, it will be nothing. And realistically, we proposed in that particular area 100-feet buffer. That's exactly what the city mentioned in different places. And just to understand, this is like maybe 50 feet. If it's this room, 50, 55. This is double of forestation exists or more. And that's what we're willing to protect. And we're gonna have beautiful houses over there. They're not gonna be small. It's a 12,000, 13, 14,000 square feet lots. It's gonna be estate lots. And just to leave that Lakeview Boulevard empty and not used with all infrastructure, which already city put, it's a waste. And you are planning board, you know, I'm a civil engineer by trade. And to have all infrastructure right in the front and to have acres of land just to waste them, not to use. If city asks us about, let's have a park over there, let's have a playground, let's have something, we absolutely open. And we discussed that. But city said, you know what? We don't want anything. We want just to protect ourselves, our position, and after the meeting in September, we addressed it. We sent it emails, we had a couple of meetings with them, and it was absolutely unproductive because they said, let's planning board to decide what to do. They don't want to decide. And that's the situation. For us to spend another thousands and thousands of dollars of the design, you know, specific design, it's pointless. It's just a waste. That's why we, on the official papers, we marked that area as SFR2 without specific. This is conceptual layout. This is one of 25 which we had, which we discussed. But all what we ask right now, let us give a chance to build something nice over there. And we will talk about specific design when its time will come. But if you will say no to this, so it's going to be waste. In the middle of Palm Coast, thousands of linear feet of Lakeview Boulevard will be forest. That's it. That's an alternative.
I think everybody understands that. So let's, I think we are where we are with track 3, so let's move on to another one.
Well, so what? Was there a consensus or just
The consensus was 4-2, the staff proposal,
Okay.
with one abstention.
Okay. I'll make note of that.
Next one, Bill.
Okay. Okay.
Actually, I'd like to make a comment.
Yes, sir.
You know, the staff works hard and they make a recommendation, but your kind of comments make it sound like we're not really here to do anything other than to support the staff, and we have shown that that is not always the case. So, you know, we've given you the opportunity to come back with a design. Granted, you guys couldn't see eye to eye, but there's nothing here that gives us any opportunity to say, well, look at this, the developer is trying, you know, here's a new option to look at. So just because the staff says, you know, we're not interested, that doesn't mean we're not interested. So, and I think you can tell by our comments tonight that we all would have liked to seen some.
Mr. Albano, I'm glad that you say that. So yes is a possibility. You're interested. You have the ability, you just said it, and we agree, and it's just staff. You have the ability to be creative. You have the ability to make suggestions. You have the ability to make a recommendation subject to greenhouses, yellow houses, larger lots, smaller lots. You have that ability. That's what you're here for. I agree with you 100%. But to say it's one or the other, we already heard from our attorney that, no, you all have the ability to put forth your stamp, your design, your thoughts on this. And again, we're an open book. We're ready to work with someone who wants to work with us.
Okay, let's move on.
So this is 10, and 10, I think we agree with staff with 10. So view shed protection in this area, view shed protection of 50 feet, staff thinks is sufficient. In other areas, they think it's 100. In other areas, they think it's 700 feet. So we agree with staff that 10 is, we're fine with 10. But 9 is a difficult one, as we went through before and we had the video. You know, again, I guess the die is cast that you all have determined that because we don't see eye to eye, but yet we see the backs of our partners on this, that we have to come up with another design. And we're willing to put forth another design for the planning board if you all are willing to consider options. I mean, we can come back with 7 different options. Staff is still going to say no, and we're willing to work with you all. So, as I said to Mr. Albano 2 minutes ago, this is up to you. So,
And just on staff too, like Mr. Schminto went through this, just to summarize again, this is along US Highway 1 with track 9, and what the applicant is proposing is institutional. I think there's a typo here on yours, Mr. Schminto. It's not commercial because there would need to be a flume change.
no, there's no, right.
Okay, so it would be institutional uses for the majority of track 9. And then staff's proposal on the right-hand side would be the view shed on the majority of the property that's in green, and the ability to do some institutional adjacent to US Highway 1 on the north portion only.
Okay, does anybody have any questions from the board?
Yeah, I couldn't recall for the life of me what, just because I didn't review the recording of the previous meeting, the rationale on the majority of, the staff's rationale on the majority being wetlands in 9 was that again strictly a view shed issue, or were there other environmental issues, or?
On why the track D, we only support it up there on the north?
Yeah.
Part of the reason was in the tracks 9, there was a lot of those people on the west side of the road had lakes behind their property, and I've heard that the water has went down on those lakes over a period of time, and there's some silting in. But once you got past, so if you got your backyard and you got a lake area there without much, and then you go to the other side of the lake and the lake width varied. so that there was typically a tree line at the top of the bank approximately. But once you got beyond that, the area was on the thin side. So it did not lend itself to quality development very easy. So I think that's where staff was trying to be consistent on this, the way we were on tracks 1 and 3, where we wanted a wider view protection zone.
Can you,
Mr. Scully, if you, I'm sorry.
can you tell me the width of track 9 there? It looks like it's like 300 feet or more,
Yeah, it's pushing 400 feet.
400.
And if you recall from the pictures we had on track 9, there are old ponds there that have silted in, do not accommodate stormwater, do not help the city with their drainage issues. And shortly, if not now, are non-functional and just returning back to a forest. And our proposal was to provide them with a view shed protection of the 100 feet, as okay in other areas, or in the alternative, work with the city to provide drainage so that the area doesn't flood anymore, and connecting the northern side through ponds and lakes down to the southern side so that it could drain properly and be draining in perpetuity. That's no longer going to happen. And if it goes back to natural and becomes a forest, I don't know what will happen, but it's certainly not going to improve the drainage issues in that area. So we put forth a plan. 9 is just a bubble map, but there was a lot of detail that we had been working with staff. For now pushing 2 years, and this is where your staff is. So again, I'll say for the record, we're willing to work with the city on creating something that's beneficial to the city, the residents, and ourselves.
So just to be sure, I'm looking at September's presentation.
Yes, sir.
There's not any difference between 9 and 10 today and in September. Am I correct?
That is correct. When we went to staff and
You're
we...
at loggerheads.
No, we're not at loggerheads, sir.
Okay.
There's a nuance there. We're not at loggerheads. We're saying, please work with us, and we're not changing anything. That's not loggerheads.
Gotcha.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
quick question,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Chimento.
Ma'am, sorry.
In the proposed development agreement, in the table on page 6, you made there's some red things that are in red, which is basically what you're proposing and staff is in disagreement with. However, for track 9, it says the use of this track will be limited to 8.3 acres of institutional uses.
Yes.
Is that, how does that translate to the map that we're looking at?
Well, in your code, 8 acres, we have showed staff a conceptual layout of 9, what 9 would look like with an institutional user. And you have a floor area ratio, so we would be limited on how much development on that track, and how it lays out and engineered would be designed in the future. But the setbacks from the existing residents and the maximum square footage on that site is in the PUD.
Okay, so the 8.3 acres, staff is in agreement with that, and you are in agreement with that also?
We are...
Because as it's written now, that's what I'm getting at. You know, if we're trying to go through this, I want to make sure what the planning board decides to do is correctly shown in the development agreement.
Well, to be very candid, we're fine with limiting the amount of development on track 9. It's just the location. Staff has proposed that the gray area up there be the only area where you can develop. And staff also knows that there's a big pond and a wetland there that essentially makes that area non-functional as for development. So, I mean, we'll just agree to whatever you want to agree to.
What's the entire acreage of track 9?
It's about 20-something, 20-something
Okay.
acres. Correct?
Yeah, I think what's happening, Nasa, is the 8 acres is the portion of the city staff recommendation, the D up north.
Okay.
The 8 acres is what the
City.
brown is?
That's what it
On
appears to
city-
me.
Okay.
Okay.
And that's what's in the development agreement.
Yes, it is. So that's why I'm asking, because it doesn't look like 8.3 acres on what you're suggesting, Mr. Chimento.
We are fine with developing 8.3 acres of institutional. What we had disagreed is the location of it. Staff wants to put it at the north, where there is ponds and wetlands, where there's not really 8 acres of usable land. And we wanted to place it elsewhere with additional protections, which are provided in the PUD that we wanted.
Okay, I understand that.
Thank you.
So have you discussed the alternative location with staff? And if so, what is the disagreement about that location?
The disagreement, not to sound silly, is that it's no. There's no alternative. There's no discussion. There's no deviation from staff's plan. That's what I keep saying. If we said, can we move it down 100 feet? The answer has been very clear from staff. We're not changing our recommendation. That's our professional recommendation, and we're not changing.
Yeah, and the difference is that if you look at track 9, and we were okay with developing those institutionals to the north because they're not abutting the existing single-family residential homes.
I think the staff's position is consistent with what it has been through every tract, that wherever you're backing up to existing lots, you're keeping the view protection zone.
Trying to as much as possible, Mr. Chairman, and, you know, and due all respect to this board, you know, to go back and try to work with the applicant, you know, I just need to say that, you know, staff's been working on this for a long time. And, you know, our senior planners, our AICP certified senior planners and staff had an opinion, and there was nothing that made us change our minds. There was no additional information that we haven't heard before. You know, I mean, granted, I know the planning board wanted us to go back and work with them and compromise, but from our professional opinion, there was nothing that illustrated a change in the code or a change on our interpretation. And, you know, and with that said, you know, I mean, this is a development agreement, and the planning board has every authority in the world to make a recommendation and to add language to the development agreement as well.
All right, any other questions from the board? So I'll ask for a consensus on this one, staff versus applicant.
I'm torn at the moment. I think if the applicant can maybe increase the size of the view protection zone, I think the people that butt up against track 9 could benefit from, you know, the increasing traffic on Highway 1 and have a buffer. So I'm kind of split at the moment.
Widen the view protection zone and keep the ability to develop along US 1, but widen it for the existing homes that are already there.
Okay, Mr. Scully?
I would agree with what you're torn on and what you are saying. I mean, you had to throw out a number, you know, I'm just not qualified to do so.
Right. Yep. And to reiterate, I agree with him. I mean, that's he said it better than I did. So,
If I may make just a quick point out a suggestion, or take it or leave it. Okay, so the current development agreement, as I said before, it says use of this tract is limited to 8.3 acres of institutional uses. All remaining areas include view protection zones, new and existing ponds, and natural buffers. So if it's a 20-acre parcel and they're using 8 acres for the institutional uses, and everything else has to be the view protection zone, instead of necessarily establishing a buffer wide, you could say in no instance could the institutional use be X amount of distance to the residential use. And that would maintain everything around it to be a view protection zone, except for the area that's used as institutional, and it couldn't get any closer than X amount, you know, so you have it already in here. I think from what the first three members were saying, but that's one way you can consider potentially, getting there if you were interested.
Well, and as I understand it, they're asking for commercial, and right now the staff is.
No, that's a mistake. I believe what they
Mistake.
said, there's a,
It is all
it's
institutional?
institutional, that's
Okay.
just a clerical error, I believe.
Okay.
Yep.
And I think that's the dilemma that I have too, is I kind of feel like the other board members here is, I'm faced with a choice between A and B, and I really want to look at C. But when faced with.
As do we.
When faced with the choice of A and B, I would lean towards the staff. But I kind of feel like they do, that I think there's something in between that could, provide a better view protection zone and still allow some of the frontage on US 1 to be institutional.
I think in this case, you have A and B, but they're not representative necessarily. A is not representative of what it would be reading it in conjunction with what the development agreement says. I think, the staff's is representative, this is the 8.2 acres right here. The applicants, you still have the 8.2 acres, it's just anywhere in between, and anywhere where there's not those 8.2 acres is view protection zones, new and existing stormwater ponds, and, natural buffers. So that's what I just wanted to make sure that you're getting a holistic picture of what the development agreement says too.
So procedurally, though, Mr. Chair, as we go down this path by each track, and we come to the end of it, it's obviously not the simple, may I have a motion?
Right.
I'd ask, how are you planning on handling that, Mr. Chair? But it's, this is a different process than we've used before. This is a consensus crafted motion that's sorry.
It's difficult, and
It's
I was
heavy,
afraid
but
of that
that's
as we go through here. We're going to be bouncing back and forth.
Yep.
And then, so how do you quantify that? And at the end of the day, could be that we say yes to one, no to the other, or we say bring it back again. And of course, they always have the option. We're not the final say in any of this. We're making a recommendation, and it will go on to the city council twice, I think. So ultimately, it'll be someone else. But we're charged with making a recommendation, so hopefully we can do that. And it is difficult.
I agree.
I mean, the staff can take a position, but you can take another. I mean, you can show something else to us, and I think that's kind of what we're asking for, is to see something other than just A or B, because when faced with that, I'm not sure you're going to fare too well. But
I absolutely understand what you're saying, and we're interested in option C also. But remember, what you directed us to do was go negotiate something with staff. You didn't say, come back, Mr. Shimento, owner, with alternative ideas. You said, go negotiate something with staff, and we just don't have a negotiating partner.
well, maybe we should. It was a long night that night, so.
Well, I think what we came to realize, and when Mr. Albano made the motion, was that, gee, this thing started as X, and over time, with the input of the public and back and forth, it came a long way.
Yes.
So I think and the spirit of the comments, even though I know there's strong opposition to many segments of it, were such that there seemed to be an air of cooperation. So when Jim made the motion, we were like, gee, that makes a heck of a lot of sense, because it seems like there's only this much more to go. So perhaps we erred in that, and I guess we have to fix that now. Or
Let me move on down, because I didn't get that far, but see how the rest of the board feels about track 9.
Understanding the language already in the development agreement, it would be my recommendation that we include language with the minimum amount of footage between the houses that are abutting the property and the view, for the view protection zone. And my question would be, with the 8.83 acres, does it have to be contiguous acreage? Or can they just a total developable space of 8.83 acres within the 20 acres?
They certainly could do that, yes.
So then, that would be my recommendation, so that, because then, understanding it that way, then the visuals are somewhat misleading based upon the development agreement language. So it's not necessarily, and this is why, Mr. Chimento, is really important that, although we didn't specifically say bring us back a different, some different concepts if you're not able to negotiate something with the city, I think that would have been beneficial if you had done that here. Because the misleading part of this track 9, it appears as if you would like to develop the entire 20 acres.
Understand.
And so that and then when your development agreement that you prepare says 8.83 acres, it's misleading. And this is what can cause distrust. If it says that, and then you propose something, you provide a visual that says 20 acres. You understand what I'm saying?
I agree. I understand exactly what you're saying. I do. I understand.
So that's my recommendation.
Okay, let's move on down.
I concur.
Okay,
As do I.
okay. What's the only one we haven't done is tract 1?
You got that, Bill?
The buffer width.
I can't hear, I can only hear a
We
couple
can go listen
people
to it again.
because I don't have great hearing to start with, but with the mask on and the planning board member speaking a fair distance from the mic, it's like I'm having a great deal of difficulty hearing. I don't know.
I think look, could I try to summarize this
Sure,
track?
go ahead.
There was consensus that they would allow for the what's the acreage?
8.3.
Limited to 8.3 acres of development of all of tract 9, as they are illustrating here, with a protection buffer. And I guess what we need to know, so we can write it into the development agreement, what is that distance?
Right now, it was shown as 60 feet for your information.
60 feet from the abutting properties.
Right, that's what's shown on there right now. It's probably easier to see on the applicants.
And there's a pond, correct? I mean, there's a water system that runs behind those properties, correct?
On some of that area that's shown green as view protection zone, a lot of that used to be ponds, and so it's maybe shallower at this time.
So what Mr. Hoover's saying, that the current view protection zone is 60 feet. And then what I'm hearing is that to allow the 8 what have you to be developed within that track and then increase that buffer. So what I'm asking, so we can, write it in a recommendation or your consensus, what would that be besides 60 feet?
And staff has been recommending 100 feet on other tracks, correct? A minimum of 100 feet?
Yeah, we talked earlier about 100 feet.
The applicant showed 100 on track 3. I think on some, you're correct, I forgot. On some of these earlier tracks where they were proposing like 3 or 4 lots going east to west, and then let's say south of there was homes or platted lots already there that were going north to south. So that was in their backyard. We cannot support that because it has to have a view protection zone. So in those cases, we sort of roughed in about 100 feet. So you are correct.
I think what you're hearing is that, utilize your frontage on US 1 to come up with your 8.3 acres and provide a minimum of a 100-foot buffer to the other lots, and then, show how you want to do that on track 9. Don't just show the whole thing as brown, because that's misleading to us.
No, I understand. And in the PUD, we anticipated this to be an issue, is that in the PUD, we particularly say, as it relates to track 9, because it is sensitive, or forgive me, I've just lost it.
Okay. Well,
Prior to making any application, we'll prepare a conceptual site plan and hold neighborhood meetings consistent with the requirements of the LDC to show the community before we even make application when any type of development plan. So we understand.
Okay. And
I have a quick question for Mr. Tyner. Is there maximum building height for institutional?
Yeah, we do, but it's based on the FAR. Did we in the development agreement put a height limit on the institutional
Remember, but
section?
I got the,
No, sir.
ESP has a minimum height of
Maximum.
100 feet,
No,
which we wouldn't support.
maximum.
So that's a good point. You may, since they are not with a buffer, you may want to consider a height limitation.
Are we allowed to make
Sure.
a recommendation
Absolutely.
for max height?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
I make, my consensus is no more than 40 feet.
The
If we
height for
start getting
sing,
close to 100 feet, then the people that live back there, great, they have some trees, but now they're looking at an office building or something.
I was thinking the maximum height in residential, I think, is 35.
Yes, sir.
So I think if you keep it somewhere around that, I'm not saying it has to be that, but somewhere around that, then you're consistent with the rest of the neighborhood.
Agree?
I agree, with 35
Okay.
feet height and 100 foot.
35 feet height for
So it's
for the
essentially a
institutional.
two-story building.
100-foot.
Minimum of 100
100
foot
foot. Yes, view
view
protection.
protection zone.
Got it.
Okay?
Did I
David,
hear two-story and so
Well, if
there
I would
would be
limit
a
it to two
maximum
sto-
height?
35 foot,
35 feet.
35 feet max.
All right, anything else on track 9? And track 10, you said you were okay with the staff, because yours is slightly different, but
Yeah,
you're,
we're fine with the
You're okay with
buffers on
that?
the sides, yes, sir.
okay. And that leads us to track 1.
That leads us to 1, yes, sir.
And I think that's back at the front. Is
No,
that,
I think that was,
there we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we were here last time, our proposal was on the left, staff's proposal was on the right. We heard comments from residents that didn't want view shed protections of trees, they wanted the lake, because if you go to the next one, we had proposed, this is really what we'd like to do, is make it larger if we can put our stormwater ponds on that side. That way, all those residents on the north side and the south would have now lakefront property rather than a 50, 60, 70-foot stand of trees. And then we did that because we need stormwater on here, so we said, well, why can't we use that as a feature? So that's really what we would like to have, is the conceptual layout too, so that we could provide stormwater and bring value to the existing residents' properties rather than just a stand of trees. So we wanted to talk about that with staff, and you've heard that story before. So,
But this concept plan does not account for the loss of the approximately 57 homes that were going to be on track 3, correct?
that is correct. That is correct. And so as a result, there's that pressure that we have to balance when the community said we want home sizes consistent with our neighborhoods. That's the yin and the yang. It is. You're right.
Mr. Chairman, maybe I can
But you're also
help a
not
little bit.
you're also not developing that.
Yeah, I just want to say, this development agreement is what would be recommended to our city council. So, if you're going to recommend in these, SFR1 or SFR2 zoning district, and just because, they're not going to be developing the other tracks doesn't mean that they're going to make these lots smaller.
Right.
It's what is in the development agreement is what is being recommended.
Okay.
Okay?
I have a question for
Former-
Mr. Dickinson.
This is SFR1 on track 1?
Bill,
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yep.
Mr. Dickinson, can you get water to flow from track 1 to the retention ponds in 4 and 6? In order to get these 57 lots to reduce the amount of water or ponds in conceptual layout 2 and move water to 4 or 6?
I think the distance is too far.
Too far,
To
okay.
have that happen. You need to have the water get there somehow. You have to go under Lakeview. and it would
Okay,
be
yeah,
it
I
would be
didn't know the
difficult.
overview to see if there
Be
was
very
anything that was
difficult. It's-
contiguous.
The reason the plan was developed for track 3, not to go back again, but was the fact that there's a large ditch along Lakeview Boulevard. So it was just a natural conveyance to the ponds and get the development away from the adjacent residents. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Could you go back to the comparison of the staff plan and applicant plan? So the biggest difference here is obviously the view protection zone over on the right side versus a pond. And then the same thing to the south, though you do have on yours you have development to the south and they don't. I'm curious to hear when we get to public comment how the people that live there feel about view protection zone versus having a lake behind their house.
Answer any questions you may have about this one. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, is this the former driving range?
The driving range portion of the golf course was roughly around where the number 1 is.
Okay, and this is where the majority of your development is going to be, correct? In terms of your residential units, is on track 1, correct?
The bulk of it?
Yes, the majority of the units.
Well, based on your recommendation, that'll be essentially the only area.
So my question would be that, is there a representative here that could explain to us the soil testing from Atlantic Ecological Services that would be able to answer any questions?
Yes, we have our engineer, Jody Sisk, here who can talk about that. Can you give us 1 second?
Thank you.
Hi.
Hello, thank you. So,
Would you state your name and address for the record?
Jody Sisk, 201 Bass Road, St. Augustine, Florida.
Thank you.
so you performed the testing for Atlantic Ecological? Did you perform the testing?
I personally did not perform the testing, but one of our consultants did. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so my first question would be that the results as it pertains to arsenic, it was found that 2.1 milligrams per kilogram, which is the soil cleanup target level for arsenic. And it was recommended that discrete soil borings be advanced within the driving range. Can you tell us what is the difference between that test and the limited soil investigation that was completed on the property, which is what you used for this report, since you're recommending additional testing? What would be the difference between the recommended testing versus the limited soil investigation that was completed?
So what we did was limited soil testing across the site. And the old driving range was the only area that we found arsenic contamination that was even close to the target level of cleanup by DEP, which is 2.1 for residential. So all the other ones were much lower than that. So within the residential range of not needing any type of cleanup. So what we recommended is that further testing occur at the driving range because we were at 2.1, which is the threshold level. Just to get basically again, this was limited. We need more testing of that driving range to know exactly what's going on, which means more grid samples and basically more sampling. And to see if there's one certain area that maybe has a little bit more compared to the rest. And that's all the difference.
Have you been contracted to provide that additional testing since this report was provided in March, and it's been 8 months now? Have you conducted that additional testing as of yet?
No, ma'am, we have not.
Okay. Mr. Chimento?
If I may ask Mr. Sisk, while you're here, just about the process after that, once it's identified, what happens? So this is important information for you all.
Well, if it's identified and it comes back at basically all of it's below 2.1, then they're not required by the state to do any cleanup because it's below the threshold. If it's above 2.1, then the owner, the applicant, will have to go through a site remediation with DEP before they can do any construction on the site for residential. Again, that's a residential threshold. It's not for commercial or industrial or anything like that. But since this is a residential zoning, or it's going to be, they would have to, once you get those areas 100% identified, if there are areas over 2.1, then they'll have to go through site remediation with, and that's a process with DEP and it's initiated by the applicant with Florida Department of Environmental Protection.
and they provide the state basically a plan. This is what we found, and this is what we're gonna do to remediate that before we construct on this site with residential development. And then that cleanup occurs, which is typically either removal of the soil that's contaminated to a point where it's now not contaminated, it's below the threshold, and that soil is removed and it's sent to a certified line site, contaminated site. And then at that point, the fill that they bring in is going to be clean fill, and the dirt is no longer contaminated. And then DEP will sign off on the site assessment that it's complete. So there's different ways of doing it, but typically the soil is removed from the site that's contaminated.
So the 2.1 level for residential is conservative compared to commercial, correct?
Very conservative, yes, ma'am. We come close to 2.1, if not sometimes over 2.1 on sites that have never been used for anything in Florida. We have arsenic in our soil anyway. If you're on a coquina site, like over along the Coquina Ridge, most of that soil is over 2.1 because of just the natural process between lime and water and the soil in Florida. So we have a lot of soil that has, we always get arsenic in our soil. This is a young golf course. Typically the ones that we find really bad arsenic are just like the old citrus fields. It's something that's from 1970 and earlier. Those are the ones that are typically very contaminated with arsenic.
However, the form of arsenic is, according to the National Institute of Health, the toxicity is influenced by chemicals such as herbicides and pesticides, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So the naturally occurring arsenic, you really can't compare it to the arsenic that has been influenced by herbicides and pesticides, which is why the level is conservative for residential, because you have people living there, versus in a commercial site, they're not spending as much time
Yes,
there.
ma'am.
So
And you
we're
don't
looking
have-
at more long-term exposure.
Yes, ma'am, and it's the exposure that's the issue. Again, residential, you've got people who are gonna be working their yards. Compared to commercial, well, you don't have people that are typically out there with their hands working in the yard. So there's a very big difference between those two. And that's why that is different, you know, especially, and then you look at industrial. So it goes up even further, so.
Thank you so much
You're
for answering
welcome.
my questions. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could I just add to that?
Yes.
Because, you know, at the beginning of our presentation here, you know, we added some language from the last time. I just want to read it. A contamination assessment activities, including soil and/or groundwater samples, shall be conducted by a qualified professional that is authorized to assess and make recommendations for such activities per Florida Department of Environmental Protection standards and shall be consistent with all applicable Florida statutes. This was existing. Upon application for a site plan or subdivision master plan, the owner shall provide the city with all studies or reports required by federal and state agencies. We also added that if soil or groundwater contamination is above the state concentration levels, remedial action in accordance with Florida Department of Environmental Protection standards shall be accomplished prior to construction activities within the affected area. So we did add some language, and we also added some bond language that if there is contamination contamination on the site, that the applicant would post a bond for what the kind of per our standards for cleanup activities. So, you know, we're comfortable with our language, and if this moves forward and prior to development, they're going to have to provide, you know, those details and, you know, complete the assessment in accordance with this language.
All right. Any other questions from the board on tract one?
So that was, between last meeting and this meeting, that was added?
Yes.
And does the applicant have any issue with that
No,
additional
no, I mean,
language?
we did negotiate and discuss lots of things, but the change to the
Right,
the
okay.
drawings were not.
Thank you.
So, yeah, we're fine with everything in here. Yes, sir.
I noticed that last night when I read it, that it had been added, and I'm glad that it was added. However, I wanted to question for the record.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions from the board? To be consistent.
Just a quick one. What is the difference in the view protection zones between the proposal and staff's recommendation in the green area to the east of track 1. What are you proposing versus what they were proposing?
What are we proposing?
Yeah, if you look at the difference between track 1 that runs north and south, in between the residential area and your track 1, your view protection zone is pretty narrow, where theirs is fairly wide. We know what the difference is between that dimension?
I don't know dimension, but it's dozens of acres.
Yours,
It says 100 foot.
Yeah, so,
yeah,
Mr.
pl-
Albano, like this, he said this room is 50, 55
Right.
feet, or we proposed 100, or if we could put our stormwater there, it could be even wider.
Right, okay.
yeah, your plan that you showed a little bit ago had a stormwater pond that ran that whole length.
Yes, right.
Gave you a separation. It's not the same as the view protection zone, but it is a separation.
Right, okay.
All right. To be consistent, shall we go through each board member and tell me what your consensus is between the two plans? If you have one.
Can you put it back, Bill, to the other one?
Back up. Considering that track 3 is still in debate and they still have the ability to, they need to put a development in, I'm kind of siding with the applicant on track 1 at this point.
I agree. Do you agree?
I do stipulated that the setbacks in the southeast are 100 foot, as it says in one of the development slides. It says 50 here on this side-by-side, and I believe one of the slides from the September showed 100 foot and 100 foot.
We're fine with 100 foot.
Yeah, I agree with Jake.
It's
on that.
the southeast.
I can't see it on my glasses.
It's the southeast L here. That's
Yes.
right here. See what I'm saying?
Right. I tend to agree with you, though I am really curious to hear from the people that live there about the stormwater, because to me, having that separation across the pond is every bit as good as having just trees. I think it brings more value, but I'm curious to hear what we will hear in public comment. On to you.
So, based upon what you just said, I would like to hear what the residents would have to say as well before I make a decision on track 1.
Okay. Same with you? All right. If there are no other questions from the board, we'll go to public comment.
Thank you all.
Does anybody want to take a break before we do that? No? Good? Okay, I'm good. All right, this is a public hearing. You want to speak on this issue? I know you've heard a lot, and some of it can be pretty confusing. Come up, state your name and address for the record. You will have 3 minutes. There's a clock up here. When you get down to 2 minutes and 45 seconds, please try to wind it up. So we'll open the public hearing, and anybody who wishes to speak can come forward.
My name is Mike Martin, and I live on Lake Success. And I can tell you that I have absolutely no interest in having water behind my house. I don't need alligators coming out of the retention pond and crawling up on my property. I don't need to have to worry about getting flood insurance because the HOA is not properly maintaining the levels of the lake. And I don't want to have to sue the HOA for not doing their job. And I also want to say that I'm really outraged at the fact that the so-called report on the arsenic has not been made public. We asked Virginia Smith, the city clerk, whether she had received that report. She said she never had received it. So this is the first that we're hearing of the report. We have a right to know what that report says. I could have examined that report and based my remarks on that report. I don't know what that report says. I can tell you that I did speak to Mr. Craig Park of the DEP, and I told him what Mr. Chimento's remarks were in the September meeting, that they attested only to 6 inches and 1 foot. Mr. Park is the project manager for the remediation of the Ponce de Leon golf course in St. Augustine, so he is pretty knowledgeable about contamination on golf courses. He told me that 6 inches and 12 inches are not sufficient to test for arsenic. He said that the standards of the DEP require them to test every foot down to the water table. He also said that they need to test for areas around the sheds where the pesticides were kept, where they were mixed, where they were loaded, because those are the areas that they find contamination in. He also said that they need to test the areas where the gasoline tanks were kept for their gasoline-powered cars, the golf course, because those areas also have spills, and there could well be petroleum products in the soil. So I have to say, I'm really disappointed in the city and in you people for not making that report public, because apparently you have it. And nobody has indicated to us that anybody had possession of it. So we haven't seen it. And that's really unfair to spring it on us that, oh, well, now there's a report, but it wasn't made public. So I really am outraged that this has happened. And I urge you to send that report to the DEP and allow them to look at it and allow them to examine it, because they cannot act unless they are notified there is contamination. And if there is contamination, whether it's just on the driving range or not, they need to know about it. So I urge you to please contact the DEP, send them that report, and get them involved, because the public safety should be your primary concern. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Leanne Pennington. I live on Track 2, Lake Success. I actually didn't suspect we'd be here so soon, especially without resolution by both parties. So what has changed? The only thing I can suspect that's changed is that we have now passed our election, and perhaps they feel confident in having enough votes at this forum or the council to get through this and get the approval. I do appreciate Mr. Scully disclosing that he had a conversation with the attorney. I'd ask that maybe he consider recusing himself as fairness to our residents who have been fighting this battle. I don't know if you know this, but the four sister golf courses here in Palm Coast were actually created at the direction of the Federal Trade Commission. It's very unique, the IT&T development. They were actually mandated in a consent agreement as green space and flood mitigation when it was originally developed. When the land code was developed, the golf course residents were given inalienable rights in that land code. It specifically states that the existing direct golf course views from the rear yards of our existing platted lots located in those residential districts shall be maintained. Our line of sight shall be maintained. Now, the verbiage in the land code does not indicate it has to be an active facility, golf facility. Furthermore, this city has stood by our rights, including publishing quotes in our local newspapers that state the verbiage, such as this quote from Jason DeLorenzo of the city. In simple terms, it means no developer may build on a fairway blocking the backyard view of a resident or planned homes along those fairways, because those who bought homes there did so on the expectation that they're living along a golf course. Now, the fact, this is what he says, that it is no longer a golf course is not relevant. As the code makes it explicit, the rule applies even to former golf course communities. You have to apply to still existing guidelines. He goes on to say, the code does not define a direct golf course view. It does not assign an actual distance. A fairway could be quite wide. A view is subjective. He concedes that we took a strict interpretation of that view. Strict or expansive, the end result is no homes on fairways abutting any existing planned homes. So after reading this in newspapers, our residents feel very assured that the city's protecting our value, our privacy, and our health. We actually went from 400 residents turning up at the first developer meeting to what's here today. And why is that? It's because these residents believe the city's protecting their rights. However, I want to put us on notice here today that we have retained legal counsel. We are prepared to file a class action once this board or council goes against those rights or changes that land code. You will not infringe upon our rights, you will not take away our home's equity, and you will not intrude upon our privacy or our health. Enough's enough. There is land to be developed here for him, and that's where he needs to stick to and stay out of the fairways. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next speaker.
Charles Davis. I'd like to share a couple information. Mr. Cimento and I met many different times a while back. I am a developer. Okay, and I'm very, very disappointed in everything that I hear, because when somebody goes to buy a piece of property, the first thing they do is they do all of these different tests. We're listening to these people saying that we're gonna submit this, or we're gonna submit this, or submit this. Then we have the developer that comes up and says, it costs lots of money to do this and costs lots of money to do that. Folks, this property, and I am one of the original investors when we bought it the last time. I am one of the people that show that we paid $500 a day because the two partners did not want to mow the lawn. So you charged U.S. citizens, no different than any other U.S. citizens, $500 a day. Now, when it closed escrow, and that gentleman bought it, between him and Mr. Cimento, whoever bought it, okay, whoever holds the note, whatever the scoop is, we can find all that out later, which we will get to the bottom. I have 3 minutes. So, when we bought that property, we knew what you could do with it, what you couldn't do with it. And that's the reason why we paid $300,000 for that property. That's the reason why, because there was no developable land. Arnold Palmer is a friend of mine. I'm going to tell you what, you got a championship signature Arnold Palmer golf course, okay? And you guys want to go develop it. You want to take it out of your city. You want to take out things that are monumental that originally Toby, who did not work for him before, said that that was the original gem and jewel of Palm Coast. And I'll tell you what, Mr. Palmer's not alive anymore. But I can tell you what, you cannot replace that golf course in your city. And if you think that this development, by making these things and these things and these things adjustable, I'm going to tell you what, your city attorney needs to get with somebody that understands other advice from city attorneys that know how the state works, understands each statute that he brings up, instead of has people up here, and I'm not saying none of you guys are qualified, but I'm saying I'm listening to him talking about an agreement, okay? There should be no development agreement until all these tests are done, number one. So if you guys want to say you're not going to dig this, and the gentleman that wants to come up and says, no, I didn't dig the test, great question. How far were the holes? Great question. Another gentleman comes up here and he says, you know what? We don't have anything. The residents get a paper 2 weeks ago, something in the newspaper, and it shows they're trying to propose a water park. The water park is so that the water goes over here and it makes the developer get more density. If you guys want to preserve your city and do what's right and be heroes, save this Arnold Palmer Championship golf course and give the people what they have. And when somebody wants to talk about a view, boom.
Right.
The view can see as far as the eye can see, and we can see the moon at night. So if somebody wants to talk about a 50-foot
All right.
or 100-foot extra large,
Let's wrap it up,
this is
please.
inside. Folks need to get a clue, and as everyone says, we all know we'll have legal people here, and we also know that we will represent what we need to do and fight the fight that we got to do. I hope the folks stay aboard with the people and don't decide to go along with people that want to do things
All right.
irregular,
Sir.
have developments that they haven't even fixed.
Sir, you had your 3 minutes. Thank you very much. Next speaker.
My name's Susan Shiverdecker, Lot 145 on London Drive. I do have some things I'd like you to see due to I was at the water management for the London Water yesterday. They presented a map for us. You need to all look at this from the city. This is the water that will be maintained off of the London Waterway running into I Live on Fairway 9. I have photographs. I also have maps. I can justify to you those ponds back there have never flooded, ever. Now, the city swells on the street of London? Yes. Okay, so here we have this. If you look across the street here, this is the city proposed for a serious amount of water, which will be an outflow into what is now not flooded. Also, if you look at the city plot for what they did as of last night's meeting, and you look at the developer on track 6, 7, 8, and 9, you will notice that those swells never flooded for 2 years until the developer chose not to maintain them, because you have 5 code violations right here. You may all want to read and look at them. They state he has never mowed it, maintained it, so the water flow backs up and then floods the street. They would never do that before. Even though the other owner went bankrupt, at least they maintained those swells so the water flowed properly. You want to say I don't live on a fairway? Let's look at the legal documentation. You're more than welcome to see it. It's public info. I live on Fairway 4, Matanza Woods. So Flagler County Tax Authority in Bunnell is lying about where I live? Are you talking my mortgage company? 271 homes abut these property of the golf course. Now you're gonna tell me it's not a golf course? Then you're telling me my mortgage company is a liar. I'm a nervous wreck. Okay, ask them. If you look, God, shake it with. But if you look at my mortgage company, you'll see another part here. This is its plot plans. For my mortgage company, it calls it Matanza Woods Golf Course. If you look at Flagler Property Appraisers, it also tells it Fairways Matanza Woods. So if you don't want to call it a golf course and you want to grow up your stuff full of water, which is not destroyed by no means, but if you're going to allow him to run off of, which I found last night, there's this easement on track 9 right by my house. If you look at the developer's map, you will see his waterway and his 35 on the pipe is on city property, okay? But then look at his map, you'll see that it is almost identical to yours. If you want, you may look at all these maps. You may have it.
Thank you very much. All right, thank you. Next speaker.
Perry Matrano, 207 London Drive. Thank you, everyone on the board, for listening and paying attention to everything that's being said. A few things. First of all, it's still a golf course, despite what Mr. Chimento says. And at the end of the day, if we could pull up track 9, can you kindly pull up track 9? It's very important. Because I don't know, are any of you aware, you don't have to answer the question, but are you aware about the meeting last night that was a public meeting for the water retention pond in the London Drive area? If you're not, you're going to be amazed. That green to the left, just behind the number 9, and the little black piece that comes out is some kind of right-of-way, and that is going to be a culvert that feeds from behind the properties on the number 10. There's a big pond going to be put in over there, and that's going to go across behind Susie's house. That's why she's all nervous. And that goes through the green area down to that little lake that's at the bottom of the heel of the foot, above the letter C or G, whatever that is. That is what's going to happen there. That is going to drain more water to that area behind that property. So that's not helpful at all. This project is a mess. This is not helping the neighborhood. The part of the grass being grown on the golf course was made by a decision by who's not even elected. This is a person who works in code enforcement that just arbitrarily said it was okay not to cut the grass. Can't do that in my house. Not going to happen. So how does that happen? Okay, going to be an issue because we're going to bring that to the code. We're going to bring that back to city council regarding it. Okay, it's lessening the value of my home and all my neighbors. Although not 4,000 showed up today, but remember, we trust you. We believe you. Okay, I'm not quite happy with the attorney, to be honest with you, but that's just me. Okay, I think that there's some siding that has to be changed, and we need your help. This is not a good project. You could change it all you want, but you didn't even know about that. That changes that 8 acres. I don't even need the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, next speaker.
Hi, my name is Dennis Shiverdecker. I've got a picture I want to show you of my backyard on track 9, if it's possible. Can you show them?
We don't have a way to do that, I'm sorry.
Okay, then I want to give my time, since I'm nervous, to my representative.
I'm sorry, we don't, that's against the rules.
Do you
You
have any
cannot cede your,
excuse me, sir, Mr. Shiverdecker, do you have any copies of the picture?
This is my cell phone.
Okay,
Can I show it to you?
you can, if you guys want to look at it, you can, but this is okay, so what I just want to make sure is that we preserve the record, okay? So if you'd like to show it, after the fact, you're going to have to email it to the city clerk so that we can say, okay, this has been put in the record. If you don't have actual printed out papers.
This is where you're proposing institutional, and they talk about there's some lakes that are dried up. This is their backyard the other day.
Okay, you can just take it down to them, yep.
Well, I don't know what I'm looking at. Is it normally have water in it?
It actually goes the length of about 35 homes, this canal. It's almost like a canal that you have in the B section.
Can you put up the, isn't there an aerial of 9? No, there's not an aerial of 9, is there?
They're proposing the institutional. And it's very odd because they're actually, the city met with us last night saying they're proposing running off pipes into this. So I don't know if you know about the stormwater plan, but they had us meet at the community center regarding it. So that's what they'd be losing. And again, it runs the entire length of that London, of that track 9, that water feature. Right now.
Yeah, as the attorney said, you'll have to give a copy of that to the city so it becomes part of the record. All right, if you're done with your time, we'll go to the next speaker.
How you doing? Robert King, 22 Lewisburg Lane. Just want to kind of reference the chapter 3.0304J of the LDC. States existing direct golf course views from the rear yards of all existing plotted lots located within any residentially zoned districts directly abutting the site shall be maintained. What I'm specifically want to point out is, what about lighting? Is there going to be street lights? Is there going to be garage lights? Is there going to be Christmas lights? Is there going to be backyard lights? There's going to be radiant light. Somebody's going to have a view from their backyard, and they're going to see it. It's going to obstruct their stargazing view. I mean, it's going to affect it. I was amazed. I had a few homes built behind me at how much just a couple of homes can make a difference in the lighting in the sky. Whether that's important to you or not, I don't know, but it's important to me. One other thing, I think it needs to be maintained as a golf course. Why the urgency to it's going to just be a wasted bunch of woods is silly. What about when we get to full population? What about another 20 years? I mean, right now, Palm Harbor is doing 50,000 rounds of golf a year in the year 2019. The average golf course in the United States does about 30,000 rounds of golf. They're teeing off every 5 minutes. Every 5 minutes. What's going to happen in another 20 years? We need a place to have recreation, well-being, and a good lifestyle. That's going to be taken away. Palm Coast, what's it going to be? Just another, fill it in with a bunch of homes? Or is it going to be a nice place to live? Give it some thought. Really, people, give it some thought. This is important. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, next speaker.
Track 1, Bill, please. Track 1.
Hello, my name is Mike Wierspa. I live at 17 Lake Success Place, which on the map is at the right corner of it, right where the difference between the skinny little green and the big green. And to give you an example of that would be like being able to see this front row or being able to see all the way down. Behind our house, it is an open field. It is a fairway. If it's just this narrow, I'm not going to have that view. That really restricts my freedoms. And that view protection zone is a freedom. I agree with what they said on the arsenic test. 6 inches, 1 foot. They're gonna dig a whole lot deeper than that when they do construction there. And that needs to be tested for everybody's safety. The developer should not set the rules on how this city is run. That is why we have the staff and the people that have the citizens' interest at heart, and they should be listened to. When they say we won't work with them, does that actually mean that they won't do what they want them to do? That is not the way it should be. We need to have regulations and things that are set for all developers. They come in, they know what the rules are. It does not need to change. One other thing, and I've been in some developments, worked for developers. When you say you can put in 200 lots in this tract of land, that doesn't mean that's the maximum you can put in. If it doesn't fit for 200 lots, 180, 150, the developer has to live with that. And that's what I hope you realize and take votes on it. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Next speaker.
Thank you for letting me speak. And my name is Celia Puglisi. I don't live in this golf course, but I live in the other one, in Palm Harbor. And I am here to support. Our golf courses are at stake, especially theirs, maybe not ours. And Mr. Chimento doing a good job. And he even mentioned our past faithful for our citizens of this city, Mr. Netz, was the person that, to me, I hold responsible for losing the Matanzas golf course. Even his words, Mr. Chimento words, as reminded that Mr. Netz says, it's no longer a golf course and will not ever be a golf course again. And when he said that, he didn't think about all those 278 owners or more that own in that golf course. We are residents. We pay taxes, and we put in golf courses. And those golf courses have people that have their homes that will lose their value, they will lose their views, and that will be a destruction of their quality of life. In our city charter, and I appreciate that so far, looks like our staff is trying to work understanding our needs as residents owning on golf courses. I have to appreciate that so far, but some people don't think about, like Mr. Nick didn't think about all these people. It's our quality of life. It is also in a way our safety, because all the additional traffic without very minimal road infrastructure, the amount of water that we have here on our hurricanes and storms, everything gets flooded. And actually, they will cause, probably, they will have more flood. Like, I live here since 1991, and I used to live nearby that golf course before many years. And you know what? Never was flooded before when it was maintained as a golf course. Never those streets were flooded. I have videos that my neighbors have taken of their front roads in one of the last storms that was not a hurricane. And they were flooded from the whole street. That never happened before. I believe it's because the golf course is no longer maintained on the swells. And these people, they don't have to have these issues. And if they build on that golf course, probably that issue will come back again. Please, think about the residents first. It's in our charter. The city is supposed, in our charter reads, the city is supposed to confront growth with the existing residents' quality of life first before they decide anything. Please, let's read our city charter. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Next speaker.
My name is Brian Carlin. I live at 9 Lee Place, which is along Track 3. I'm one of 2 homes that have unobstructed view of that fairway. We believe that there's enough construction or enough homes already developed in the L section. We don't need to add any more to it. I agree 100% with the gentleman in the blue T-shirt over there that said we need to develop housing along with green space. And that's about all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Okay, next speaker.
I'm Justin Simmons. I live at 39 Lake Success Drive. I am directly behind the old clubhouse, and before it was torn down, I could see its roof. There was no lights on it, so it didn't obstruct my views for the stars, which are very beautiful back there. I have a lovely backyard. I can see multiple hundreds of feet behind my house. I'm telling you, in the applicant's proposal on tract 1, that little green space from the back of my house, not a full throw, just a toss. I could throw a softball into that beige area from my back porch. I live there. I know that area more intimately than anybody in this room. Okay, that is a very, very small space. I could toss a ball from my back porch onto the island with minimal effort. And if you could throw the ball across it, it's not really a golf course. Golf balls go hundreds of yards. You probably all know that. One of my neighbors over here recently just said, it's the first time I've heard it mentioned in weeks. If you're restricting tract 3, we have to take our lots and put them over into other areas, which forces them to be smaller, not even looking at the issue of maybe just not have as many lots. If I have an egg carton that fits 12 eggs, but 18 eggs, I don't just either cram them in or say, well, gotta get smaller eggs, you're gonna get less value. No, 12 eggs fit there. Don't cram more in and it sounds like a threat saying, well, we're gonna make them smaller, so you better. That's not the appropriate way to have that conversation. Just because you've been allowed to build this many units, if that many units don't fit, talk about putting a square peg in a round hole. I mean, come on. Also, the language that they've mentioned before says golf course view. It doesn't say you have to play golf on it. It says golf course view. The language that the applicant's attorney has been using is view shed. The words view shed are not in that code. Words view shed are arbitrary. Words view shed have been brought in. He was the only one to start using that language. The golf course view is not telling me what I don't get to see, it's telling me what I do see. The objective of that code is not to block my view of another home. The objective of that code is to preserve that I have the open space. I didn't pay as much because I came later on, and people who bought the lots before the homes were there, but I still paid a decent amount. People paid so much more money for those lots for those kind of protections. And to have them torn away, you have to understand the passion here. When these people come up to speak and it's so impassioned, it almost sounds angry, you're damn right it is a little bit, because they've paid so much. They're not going anywhere. We are rooted in this community. Like the city doesn't exist without the citizens, right? We live here. We don't want to say no development, but you don't just rape the land of all of its natural resources to see how much you can cram in, you know? The deer walk through my backyard almost nightly. Almost nightly. They won't exist with this plan right here. I'm not saying no development, but you also have to protect the citizens. And I appreciate you all being here to listen to us.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any other speakers? Anybody else wish to speak on this matter? All right, seeing none, we're going to close the public hearing.
Chairman, we have to.
We have a Zoom person? I'm
Yes.
sorry. How many do you have on there?
We got two.
Two? Okay.
There's one.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, Toby Tobin from Palm Coast. The LDC revision opened the door to the possibility of a permanently closed golf course and the possibility of future development. Well-intended city staff created the concept of a view-protected zone, which residents and perhaps staff assumed would be perpetually maintained to some level by code enforcement. Staff did not define a view-protected zone, or VPZ. They still have not. The golf course is now permanently closed, no longer a golf course in any way. That fact is not in dispute. The former fairways are now in the hands of nature, also undisputed. Unwilling to do its job for the second meeting in a row, staff has abrogated its responsibility to the PLDRB. They would like the PLDRB to define a view protected zone. Their current arbitrary stance remains since the issue was continued from the previous meeting. They've turned a quasi-judicial procedure into really what is a workshop. Their position infers that a view protected zone need not have any relationship to what you can actually see from a resident's backyard or kitchen window. According to the staff position on parcel 1, a VPZ can extend from a residential rear lot across a former fairway, now committed to nature, through 100 feet of pre-existing woods and across another former fairway for a distance of 650 feet. On parcel 3, the staff defined VPZ extends from rear lot lines through several feet of developer-owned woods across a former fairway to which, with the exception of 3 homes, no line of sight currently exists. In the earlier PLDRB meeting, there was a surprising level of reasonableness expressed by many residents. Some residents expressed a preference for a rear view with a retention pond rather than of an abandoned fairway, creating a possible win-win solution. Staff has not done its job. This is a clear ordinance defect, not a zoning question. The LDC needs to be cleaned up, but the process has dragged on way too long, unfairly impacting this developer. Someone needs to act now. I urge the PLDRB to move this project forward to the City Council with a recommendation for City Council approval, along with a strong but sensible guidance toward a definition of a VPZ. For instance, land buffer with a minimum of X feet, or a water buffer.
All right, Toby,
with a
your
minimum
3
of
minutes are up. Can you wrap it up?
Y feet. Thank you for, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, your
What did
3
you
minutes
say?
is up.
We got one more.
Okay. You have one more online? Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Hello?
Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a disconnect between what I'm seeing on the video and the conversation I'm trying to have right now.
Well, we can hear you, so
Hello?
state your name. Please state your name and address for the record, and then you can begin, and you have 3 minutes.
Okay. This is Vicki Renna. I live at 225 London Drive. There are quite a few people that live on my street that can't come to the meeting, and myself, I'm concerned about health issues, so that's why I called in. There's a very important aspect that needs to be considered when thinking about redeveloping this. I contacted the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service, and the soils in this area along London Drive are mica, and which is very poorly drained and has a high water table. 3/4 to the north of me, where the land wraps around, is on the south side of the waterway. That is also very poorly drained with a very high water table. Now, it seems that the developer is proposing to put quite a few lots in this area. I've lived here since 2001, and I can tell you there is flooding that occurs on the back of these homes. I'm one of the homes that was built in 1997, and when we had several storms in 2004, with several hurricanes coming through, the water would stand on at least half the backyard, and my yard backs up to a fire ditch, and it's all natural. So these things need to be considered when redeveloping. The other issue is I bought my house contingent upon maintaining the natural buffer behind my house. It shows on the maps about 50 feet, but in other places it's showing 60 to 100 foot. I would like to see that increase, and I would like to see larger lots so that we don't have to deal, or the developer doesn't have to deal with so many drainage issues. So that ends my comments.
All right, thank you very much. Is that it for the online comments? No more? Okay, close the public hearing. Come back to the board. Seems like we're in a way right where we were a month or so ago.
Mr. Chairman, you want me to try to address the ones that I wrote down that I think I can?
I'm sorry?
Do you want me to try to address some of the comments or questions
Sure.
that I wrote down? There was a few that I think
Go
I
ahead.
should answer. Just want to know about the report, the Contamination Assessment report. We actually received that yesterday. So we had nothing in the public record on that report. We just received that.
Okay, and we just got it as well, so it is public record.
It is
now.
public
So
record
Anybody
now.
that wants a copy can request it.
Absolutely. And also, too, there was some comments on, street lighting, stormwater facilities, soil conditions, and that type of thing. I'll lump them all in one. This is a rezoning application for development agreement. We're about the 35,000 foot level. The next step, should City Council, following your recommendation, if there is development, that's when you get all the technical, the soil sampling, the stormwater and all the engineering design. The stormwater regulations for St. John's River Water Management District, they review it as well as the city staff. But all those are at a later time through the technical site plan process. The other thing I want to mention is that there was a couple residents that came up and showed the picture of a city project. This is in no way related to this land or this project. The city did do a neighborhood meeting. The city has been doing stormwater modeling throughout the city and including the Matanzas Woods area. So this was a proposal, I guess, so to speak, for our stormwater department to improve the drainage system up north, and a neighborhood meeting, but it's not part of this land. So.
All right, thank you.
Got it.
All right, what is the pleasure of the board?
I'd like to ask the city attorney, Ms. Pennington's suggestion that I recuse myself. If that's appropriate, I certainly will. The contents of the conversation were restated about 40 times, though, by Mr. Chimento here, that the city was not going to talk to him. That was the sum of the conversation. But if it puts the proceedings in any kind of weird place, I would gladly recuse myself.
No, the requirement on disclosing ex parte communications is just that, so that you can put on the record what your discussion was and whether or not it influenced you anyway. You've put on the record what Mr. Chimento said. You've said it hasn't influenced you, so there's no reason for you to recuse your vote in this case. And in fact, the city, your duties here as a board member is to vote on it. It wouldn't be if there is something in the ex parte communications that had influenced you in some way or something else going on, but that doesn't seem apparent here. So as long as it's not influencing you and you've heard Mr. Chimento, you've heard all the members of the public speak, then it's not necessary or required under the code.
All right, are there any other questions or comments from the board?
I guess my recommendation is we kind of go track by track, and I don't know any other way to do it. We definitely don't want to kick this down the curb. We need to come up with a resolution.
Yeah.
And I think, in fairness to everybody, I think we just need to look at it track by track.
All right, does that mean you're crafting a motion?
Mr. Papa has the notes, correct?
Yeah, this was the consensus. For staff's proposal, the consensus was track 10, track 9, track 1, and track 2. and track 5, and track 4, track 6 and 7 for staff, choosing staff's recommendation. And then we got to track 3. There was a discussion there, but the consensus was for the staff recommendation. And then we left it with, on track 9, the 8.3 acres can be utilized for institutional uses for that track with a 100-foot minimum buffer and with a 35-foot height limitation. Track 1 was not decided until we heard you wanted to hear the public comment.
Right, I don't think we had a consensus on track 1.
No, sir.
Right.
Revisit track 1, Chairman?
Dan, if that would be helpful to you?
May I make one question?
Well, is it all right with the board? Because we've closed comments, so.
Well,
it's up to
Well,
the
this
board.
is the applicant.
Yeah.
So the applicant has a right to be able to come back up after the public's spoken and address any items that the public has
Okay,
put on the record.
Let's make it brief.
Yeah, there was the comments about the arsenic issues. And I want everybody to understand that this was a preliminary test that identified the existence of it. And no matter what we want to do or what the city wants to do as it relates to arsenic, the federal government controls how it's tested, when it will be tested, how it will be remediated, and how it will be deemed cleaned. So those aren't things that we get to put in or we get to decide, or your city staff. So just want to make that sure for the public that they understood that, because there was some suggestion that we needed to do things differently. As it relates to your proposals, I assume the terms and conditions of the PUD are acceptable, and what we're talking about is the maps, the areas of development. The one that I just wanted to make sure that was clear for the record is this concept of consensus. Consensus, at least on track 3, which is important to us, was not unanimous, but the consensus was a 4-3 or whatever, however you want to define it. So I just want to make that clear, Ray, for the record.
Yes, and Mr. Schmento, we need to go and address the multifamily track as well. We did not do that.
Thank you. You're right. We missed 8. Okay.
Yep.
If you want to do 1, that's fine. Then we'll go to 8.
We missed track 8?
Yes.
All right, let's not miss it. Let's talk about it. Oh,
I don't think there is 8. There it is.
So this is tract 8. It is zoned for, I guess it's multifamily, but really it's townhouses. We went through this last time, that there will be at least 150-foot VPZ between the existing property lines and any development. You can see that VPZ on the parcel is in the middle of the lake, and that lake might be modified, but it will still remain. And the residents last time also wanted to know if they would be able to continue to mow down to the water's edge, which we agreed to. We can make that a condition, Ray, if that's necessary. So the only thing that we just haven't had an opportunity to discuss with staff is locations of green belts that are on this property. I think the city staff's ideas of where the zoning and greenbelt comp plans are mistaken, and we just need to make it reflect what's actually on your maps. So, but other than that little area, we're fine with the restrictions on tract 8. So, Bill, if you have any comment?
Yeah, the one, you're mentioning that you agree with the 150-foot setbacks, but along, I think that's London Drive in the northeast corner, where you can see the green on ours. So you're agreeing verbally, but your graphic doesn't show that.
Correct. We're fine with that. We're fine with that. So make that noted in the record.
And I think the other comment is, staff previously, there is some, the area that's conservation on the future land use map, up in the green area, that is a designation that is fluid. So once you have, like Mr. Jody Sis that came up here, he's a certified, not arborist, but certified environmentalist. So he knows how to set wetland lines and get those approved. So with those certifications, with the Army Corps of Engineer and St. John's River Water Management District and city staff, those lines can change. So that was staff's point, and the applicant does know that where there is conservation area, they will not get any credits for residential density units, whereas the areas that are outside of that, they can get up to 1 unit per acre.
Correct, right. So we basically agree that your map was predicated on a comp plan that is fluid based upon features.
Yeah, so I don't think we're really disagreeing too much then.
That's fine.
So, Mr. Smith, I'm just clear. We're agreeing on track 8, and we just want to add some of the language that some of the property owners can mow to the edge?
Yeah, that's fine.
Some along that line?
Ray, I don't want to bore you guys, but technically, the difference between us on 8 is that the brown on your site will change and actually reflect the actual areas of upland, because the conservation area will change to match the wetland. So I don't want the green to be no development, because that will change once we get out there. We're already aware that the wetlands out there on your maps aren't accurate, and they'll be ground truth. So if you can just, if you're okay with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's per the code.
Okay. Very good.
Okay, but how much of a change could that be? Because if I understand you correctly, Mr. Chimento, where it says this area is greenbelt on the future land use map, you're saying that could change? All of that green?
It will change.
It will change?
It will change. We know that.
To what degree?
Oh, I bet the area that is, it looks like there's a little hash or a lighter green
Michael, I
area.
think I measured it on the city's GIS, I think it was 4 or 4.3 acres. Does that sound about right?
We're roughly there, yes.
Okay, the green, let me just clarify, the green belt won't change, but the conservation flume, okay, the green belt remains as a future land use map designation. There's a conservation, what Bill's pointing out, there's a conservation flume, and our code allows for delineation of that flume to refine it, you know, because it was done via aerial interpretation. So the applicant has the ability to go back during a site plan to get, you know, the environmentalists out there and actually ground truth it and see what's out there. And we will honor that just like we will honor what we do in our code.
Very good. See,
Sorry
you
to
guys
bore you.
agreed on something.
Sorry, I mean, this is, sorry.
Thank
Just
you.
want to get it cleaned.
Okay, any other questions from the board?
We just need to make a decision on track 1.
Yes, ma'am.
Just need somebody to know how to craft a motion for this.
Yeah.
Track 1 is.
We want to revisit track 1? Or
We could use some guidance.
We can revisit tract 1 if you'd like, certainly.
I'm not sure I like, but I think we agreed to.
Mr. Hoover, you want to put it on track 1?
Is that the better one, or you want to go back to the colored?
The board wants.
I think the one that has the two alternatives, the city and the applicant, is helpful.
Uh-huh.
I think we heard from a couple residents that live there that, at least in my opinion, clearly favored the view protection zone over the pond, so that was the one thing I wanted to hear. So any other questions or comments about tract 1?
My only comment is kind of track 1 and track 3 kind of go together in a way that if we deny track 3, then then there maybe needs to be some compromise, or we have to try to come up with a good solution here, right? So if we just take track 1 as a whole, but then a few minutes from now, we go to track 3 and it's a different story, I don't.
Well, don't be afraid to limit a tract. Don't be afraid because they're going to take those units and cram them somewhere else, because one of the speakers says that's not really the case. Yes, there's a maximum number, but that doesn't mean that you can go just cram all those into one area.
Right.
So,
Okay.
do what you think is right for each tract or the project as a whole, and don't let that worry you.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, are you ready to entertain a motion? Are you ready to entertain a motion?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, I would like to make a motion that we approve staff recommendations for tracks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, with the language included that the 8.3 acres with a 100-foot view protection zone and a 35-foot maximum height for track number 9, and that we approve staff recommendation on track 10 as well.
Okay, so the motion is to approve the staff's recommendation on all of them except track 9, but modify that to allow the 8.3 acres with the 100-foot minimum view protection zone and a maximum height of 35 feet for institutional uses.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Can
that's
I
the
just
motion.
make one clarification on that? So are we going with the applicant's proposed track 9 or the staff's proposed track 9 illustration?
Well, I think we kind of agreed that the illustration was not really accurately reflective
Okay.
of what the development agreement actually allows, according to the language of the current
Right,
development
we
agreement.
did, but it still shows, you're right. The problem with the illustration, I think you need a conjunction, maybe to get what you're trying to get to, is that you go with the applicant's illustration on track 9, but you add this additional condition to it.
Okay, so
If you thought, so on the staffs, it's all up, the
Right.
institution are all up at the top, and the applicants, they come down. So that's the difference between those two. You can have the conditions on staff, but I just want to clarify which plan you're applying the condition to.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I want
Okay.
to add, I want to add something too, because what we can do too is on the illustration, we could put a note on there that will make it clear. I mean, it doesn't make a difference. We'll add the language into the development agreement proposal of, the height and all that, and then on the figure itself, we can stipulate, this area can incorporate 8.3 whatever acres of institutional.
yes,
Be a little
that's
more
fine.
clear.
All right,
Yes.
so we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Okay, did you get that, Irene?
I got it.
All right, there is a motion and a second, so please call the roll.
Mr. Albano,
Yes.
Mrs. Lucas.
Yes.
Ms. Nicholson,
Yes.
Mr. Scully,
Yes.
Mr. Lemon,
Yes.
Ms. Shank,
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
The motion carries 7-0.
All right, thank you. Does everybody understand where we ended up? All right. That's all we have on the agenda. Ray, do you have anything else for the board?
No, sir, I don't. Just, everybody, we'll see you after Thanksgiving. Enjoy your holiday and, with your family, and I hope you have a great one.
Can you tell me what what's the meeting date for December?
16th.
The regular scheduled for, yeah, it's the 3rd.
December 16th.
Is it the 16th?
Yeah.
16th.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we do have, we're planning on having some things on the
All right,
agenda.
that's fine. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? All right, would you call the roll, Irene?
Mr. Albano.
Yes.
Lucas. Ms. Nicholson.
Yeah, we're trying to make.
Mr. Scully.
Yes.
Mr. Lemon.
Yes.
Mr. Lemon.
He said yes.
Mrs. Shank.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, we're adjourned.
Thank you.